Okay, there we go. I don't know if we're going to have Troy trading us or what, but anyway, we're here. Did you get a chance to read the document I produced about liquidity pooling?
Not yet.
Have you heard much about liquidity pooling as a thing?
Yeah, I mean, not really.
No.
Me and DeFi are like oil and water for the most part.
Which one's the oil? Yeah, so
Here, I'll pop it open. I'm sure I'll.
you kind of get the gist of it. Maybe I can. Could I get you to go to the website version of it? And then if you look at, see under NFA's P01 Dreamcatcher, would you mind just taking a quick look at what I've done with the images in that? What I've done with the images in that file, because that's really what I want to talk about today. It's going to sound odd, but I want to talk about pictures.
What are these like AI?
Yeah, man. They are AI generated based on the content or the headings of the NFAs.
Oh, okay.
And so the general gist of what I want to do is set up pooling where and like, you know how you have a software release and it's like version 1 point, well, I mean, let's be realistic, 0.5.27 or something, right? And it's like, it's not really a thing so much as a tag on a Git commit, and everyone sort of goes, you know, woohoo. How do you know who put work in? It's sort of a bit of like who contributed isn't really front and center. And so one of the, I guess the big philosophical things for me with programming was to realize that the best way to deal with events was to make them into things. So like turn a command into an object. And then life gets really much better, in my opinion. And so if you take the view that the platform we're trying to build, if you thought of it like one blockchain, each blockchain is actually an NFT, just to sort of, you know, hold your nose and swallow that metaphor for a bit. I mean, I know NFTs have been abused so bad no one even wants to say their name, but so too it was with blockchain at one time. If you viewed each of our blockchain objects as an NFT, then you might be able to say something like you can convert the contributions that people make into NFTs. You can assign some auto-generated artwork to them based on the contents of what they did, and then you can turn them into something possessible or desirable, or a thing that you can trade or hold or move around or do something with.
Yeah.
So turning something like, say I've got some money, and let's say we start a pool of funds that is like, we're going to make what was the piece you wanted to make? You were like, oh, the attribution prototype, right? So we'd sort of draft up a release of what we sort of think the NFA that describes that finished thing is. We put it into the pool basically for approval, so that, you know, it's not just us saying yes, this is what we want to do. We get some AI artwork minted for it, and then if you put money in that pool in your wallet, you will see a partial, like a grayed out pie chart of the completion of that NFA, and that is the thing that you're sort of wanting, right? And you put money in, and it helps you move the ticker forward. Money plus time moves the ticker forward because of the other people that are making code commits to build it up. Once it's completed, you actually have this thing in your wallet. Sure, you own a fractionalized share of it, but it's a thing. It's got a piece of artwork. It represents the contributions that were made in code and money to get you there, and now it's been thingified. Normally, that's like a whole lot of events, and we've taken those events, put them into something, and then given them like something colorful, like a coin or a badge or a trading card or something, and turn it into a thing that can now be moved around.
Okay.
And so that's kind of that's the system I wanted to talk about, because I know that I've jumped around between systems here and there a lot, but it's always been in the same direction. What to do first, how do we get funding, how do we not break not just not break laws, but not break the spirit of laws, like don't be con artists. How do you sort of honor people that have contributed? How do you make it so that people with small amounts of money can get in? How do you protect them from being ripped off? How do you make sure they understand what you're doing, what they're getting into? All that. And this thing sounds like the nicest balance.
Yeah. So, like, let me just try and parse this a little bit. Let me try and repeat back to you what you said.
Okay.
So, like, every single like pool is basically like an intent to build something.
Yes. But
this is the project.
More than that, it's an intent to build something in stages as well.
Okay. And like any investment into that thing is going to result in like money being available there, like to hire people to build the thing, right?
Not quite. The notion of what we're trying to do is money is available to pay for things to have been done. I think it's important to include that you only get paid when you've done something. Like, we don't pay you to just turn up and sit there. You only get paid if a thing gets done.
And done is determined by the actual usage of the thing that's being built.
Yes and no. I think that in the initial stages, I proposed the creation of a QA authority, so that first of all, we can QA the requests for work that are coming in to make sure they are actually attainable, and that we would know if they had been met or not by someone's code commits, because there's nothing worse than a poorly specified task. And then QA, that same QA authority would also say when enough code commits have been done that this particular task can be considered complete, which would automatically trigger payout from the funds. And I think you were, when you said so money so we can hire people to do things, that I think we can't also protect naive people if we allow payment before delivery for software.
Right.
Now, would that mean that nothing gets done? Well, it would mean that there's an opportunity for people with a small amount of capital, perhaps as much as goes on a credit card, to manage some workers who need to be paid up front or by the hour to complete the work and then submit that result. So just because we set the pool up to only pay on completion doesn't mean that there aren't secondary systems that can be in place that you can pay someone to work every week until they're done, but you'd just get a bigger slice of the finished pie, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a fool's errand to try and imagine like nobody would ever try and side channel anything. Like whether you build it in or not, like somebody will use whatever mechanisms are available to them in real life to achieve that end.
Absolutely. So basically, we want to keep the poolers safe, and we want to. I'm fumbling around and trying to capture this concept of offering things for sale. Offering, hey, we'll all get in a room and we'll try and make it for sale is most certainly a security. That's not really a thing. But, hey, we would like to build this thing. Do you want it too? And someone says, yes, I want that thing. And they pre-order it. And we're like, we don't you don't pay until you get delivery. That's making it a thing.
Yeah. You're trying to force assetness from it, right?
Exactly. That is exactly what I'm trying to do. Assetness out of what would otherwise be loose, ephemeral, poorly managed, incremental. I want assetness. And so that the people who, a lot of the time, the people who have money and want software are not the people who can build software.
Right.
And to them, software feels like trying to grab some air, because wherever they reach, it's sort of not there, and they just keep running out of money, and it's right. And then they talk to some devs, and they leave feeling like they know less than when they went in. But by making these into things, assetifying, they can grab a hold of that and be like, this thing with the picture of the samurai warrior lady rainbow, I want that done. And it gives them a focal point, and you're like, well, we need more money. Okay, cool. Let's keep talking about the same thing. Like, that's the classic business developer impedance mismatch, is that business needs to talk about things, and software, it's not. It's like that if you make it like that, but in general, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, I know how to write software, and I'm still asking for someone else to make it, and it still feels like grabbing air, even though I can actually write a spec. Like, I don't know what it is about code that makes it like just dodgy. So this is actually somewhere where I feel like I can add a little bit. Just like, I think you'll have a hard time, like, in the spirit of the law, ever considering something that does not exist, and like a promise to make it exist, be treated like an asset.
Why?
It's because of the way that like promising things in the future works. Like, lawyers really don't like.
Are you talking about the classification of it as a security because it was a promise?
Yeah. So I mean, like, one thing that I get from you basically is that like we can treat something that isn't here yet like an asset. Yes. We need to figure out a way. We need to figure out a way to do that. Is what you're asking for, right?
Well, I believe we have got that, where we just call it like I'd put forward the concept of the Ford App Store. It's like you can buy apps that aren't there. By saying or committing to buy them, you can make them appear, much like how a Kickstarter campaign publishes a product that doesn't exist. You can buy it, and then you only pay. Well, Kickstarter is kind of bendy in that they take your money and then use the delivery period as the time that they're building your thing, right? But I'm talking about something even more clear cut, which is to say, no software, no pay, which I think that's how I would prefer to specify and buy software.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at though is like, for things that aren't real yet,
Yeah.
there's always a risk that they won't ever be real.
Right. And if you're saying that the purchase that you agreed to make on this Ford NFA, if it never becomes real, you never have to make your payment. So it wasn't a promise as much as the buyer was made to promise that they would pay if a thing was delivered.
I see what you're saying now.
It sort of inverts it a little bit.
Right. And I mean, normally this is where a contract would be sitting, right?
Right.
Like that has all sorts of provisions for this happening by this time and that happening by that time. And this is what you get to leave with if you, like, I guess in real life, the same thing kind of happens. But what I'm trying to get at is I think the law would never look at a contract for something that's supposed to happen in the future and call that thing an asset. Like I think they would.
Yeah. I'm not asking for it to be called an asset. I'm asking for it to be modeled in a way to say that it could be an asset.
Right. This is the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law kind of thing, right? I get where you're coming from. I think it makes sense. As long as money doesn't move until the thing actually exists, then it kind of behaves like an asset.
Reading into the Howey test, like the Howey test is incredible in how much it covers. The Howey test?
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
If you want to consider is it a security or not, that's the test.
Oh, okay.
So basically, it's talking about how investment contracts are formed all over the show. It doesn't have to be for money. It doesn't have to be for shares. It can be like it's a concept of the fact that you're giving something of value to someone else who's promising you some kind of return on it because of their efforts. And it's basically to capture that class of con.
Right. And that's what security regulation is for.
Yeah. And the whole spirit of that securities regulation is intended to reduce the information asymmetry between management and investor.
Right.
And they do that by requiring minimum standards of audit and disclosure. Now, we're planning on exceeding any disclosure rules with the way that we're working, but it's not good enough to say just trust us. Like, we do need to do something else there. But what I'm trying to put forward is that by being very selective in what it is that we're selling, we can not be exposing any investors to investment risk. Insofar as if I go to Upwork and I pay for some services to build some software, there's no investment contract there. Right, and we sort of want to look like that, but in the process of us doing the work, we want to produce these NFT-like tokens that represent the work, because it captures a wider range and type of contribution and allows for royalty splits later that are resaleable royalty splits.
Yeah. I think this also kind of sounds like useful in a programming sense too, in the same way that like a promise was a useful way to talk about like asynchronous things on a system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can act like things are done all the time.
I know.
Hmm.
And so you're basically the whole concept of forward NFAs and forward apps and all that was basically a promise interface to software tasks.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I think it's a good idea. Right. So how can I help with the conversation here?
If you could read through the web liquidity pooling document and then tell me your thoughts as they happen, I guess, or tell me what springs to mind first, because that will trigger what to talk about.
Right.
So in that document, for example, the very top image is what I would have assigned to the NFA that described that project heading towards release version 1. And if you contributed to that project in any way, you would have this token show up in your wallet with a percentage ownership that was assigned to you. And if you wanted, you could go and buy other people's shares. So you could ultimately acquire all of it if you wanted.
So I guess the first question to me is like, is a pool something that has real money in it up front? Like, is it, I understand that the actual transfer of money wouldn't happen until after the thing is done. I think you're going to run into some hairy patches there as well, because like there's ambiguity in what you can ask for, I guess. Like an underspecified thing like might result in an outcome that you don't agree is correct.
Yeah, but that's why there's QA on the specification as well, and there's a cooldown period.
Right. But the pool that's sitting here, like it needs to have real money in it so that it's convincing to people to come and work on this thing, basically.
So what I'm proposing is that we actually have enough software now that we can run this thing on the Dreamcatcher. Like, it will be shitty. No one's, it'll be slow, it'll have bugs, it'll fall over sometimes, but the point is that it's running. And I can make an Ethereum contract that acts as a bridge so that you can put ERC20 assets in on the Ethereum side, and they can be transferred into Dreamcatcher land so that now you have a wallet balance. And you can put that into the pool, and then that can be drawn down by workers once NFAs are completed, and then they can withdraw the funds by backing out through that gateway to go back into Ethereum land with their newly acquired assets.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, now the sort of one of the key aspects I want to add is like, say, so I've been calling the token inversion for like a year and a bit. I'll stick with that until someone comes up with a better name. So the inversion tokens, being the currency of the Dreamcatcher, matched 1-to-1 with US dollar using DAI. So it's a innately a stable coin. There's no like inflationary gains to be had, so don't hoard it. It will do you no favors.
Right.
But
okay, keep going. Sorry, but
When you have transferred it into the Dreamcatcher, and I do intend to make it so that anyone who has approved funds coming in has to have passed a KYC and AML check, and I am contemplating making it so that if you're going to have money in the system, you need to have signed the DPL, or the basically be a good citizen license that would give people a legal recourse if there was bad behavior on the network, or someone was sort of unfaithful to what's supposed to be put on chain and what isn't, so that basically it can allow anyone who's a member can negotiate with another member to enter into deeper contracts with them, and you can start to do commerce with each other and with the outside world. And I think it's like when you join a company, you sign this contract, and then once you're in the company, you feel like you can trust everyone else at the company because you've all signed that contract. The trouble with the contract is it's usually very one-sided towards the company, but one of the byproducts of that contract is that everyone there feels a form of kinship and trust is assured. So I'd sort of want that at a much more generic, lighter level, where it's basically like who wouldn't want that kind of relationship with a bunch of random people on the internet? It's like, I can trust this person to a degree greater than some guy on a forum, because and you can start sort of doing things with honor on the internet in a way. But anyway, that aside, what I'm saying is you pass this hurdle. You've been KYC'd. We know the money didn't come from drugs. It's not fucking, you haven't been doing something bad with it. You're not just using us to wash your cash. You've got this inversion balance in your wallet. You look at the pools available, and in terms of pools, if you look at the apps tab on the Dreamcatcher website, basically I'd be looking to replace that with pools. So you can read through what each one does, see its progress, play with it a bit, all that. But ultimately, when you choose to put your money in the pool, you immediately start earning yielding tokens for you, where the tokens are like dollar per day units. So like if I've got $1,000 and I hold it in there for 50 days, I'd be able to earn a token that said that I had held my money in that pool for this period of time, because I think that even pooling your money is a valuable thing. It's like you're signaling that you're willing to, you want this thing to happen. You're signaling with a dollar amount. Like, I think that's a rewardable proposition. And so you'd immediately start to earn tokens because really, like, we're trying to increase the number of dimensions upon which we can assess contribution. And every single one of those measurements needs to be encapsulated in an assetified thing or an object at some point. And so parking your money for a certain amount of time should earn you these recognizable units. Then, if you like, you can look at the stack of NFAs or 40 NFAs that have been specified by the pool that have passed QA, and you can say that you're okay with pooling your money towards any individual one. At the moment, I think it's important that you specifically choose the ones that you want, because that passes a participation test. So one of the how we test prongs and part of the spirit of the securities regulation is that when you're relying on someone else entirely to bring you profit, that's very different to you being involved and having some say and decision making as to what goes on. And so I think I also like you can someone could reasonably blame you if they pulled your money and then you spent it on things that they're like, that's fucking stupid, that's not what I thought you were going to do. But if it's like,
Right.
if it's each individual one, they had to actually be like, yep, no, yep. Like, it's way less. You can't really say that anymore. It's like you fully were aware of how much money was going where. And then, sorry.
It strikes me that, like, this is another kind of angle to the, like, non-conspicuous consumption thesis that you're trying to build, right? Like, the consumption is political and the consumption should be meaningful. Like, it seems like what you're basically saying is you can park your money at an address and you define what the conditions are for it to be unparked from that address.
Yep.
So every address basically has like a gate on it that like only opens under the conditions that I declare as the person parking the money there.
Yep.
Is that more or less the algorithm design that you were thinking? Or like, I guess the last question that I have is just like it feels to me like the demands for unparking that money could be quite complicated, and like it's more useful to have them be dictated by a group of people who can collectively determine what a good outcome is than an individual person who doesn't really know what they're buying.
So yes, that is the algorithm that I'm thinking. Is it more useful? Well, maybe, but it's also not practical to do, and particularly if the amount of money is small compared to the complexity of the task. And that's why I want this pooling mechanism, because it allows you to offload the majority, but not all, of the complicated technical work to a group who has things like reputation and history to maintain, and so they do need to be behaving at all times in the best interest of the poolers, or else they will not have any more pool money assigned them. So basically there's the ability for them to build up trust between the poolers and the experts who are specifying and accepting the work, and also between the experts and the workers who are also having some say on what the specification is and whether or not it's done. And so that QA group is really the ones that's really the pivot or the fulcrum of the system.
Yeah. I'm like, I guess what I'm asking is like, to what extent is the person parking the money the QA group?
They are not directly, but another reason why I want people to individually select the things that they want, even though they don't know fully what they are, it's that it carries with it information. And that was supposed to be the purpose of a stock market, is that every trade that occurs does carry information with it, the price, the amount, and all that. And so the QA group handles the fine details of like code formatting and is it fit for purpose? Does it have enough tests? Does it do this and that? The QA group also contains some automated elements, like you might specify some code coverage tooling that must be used. It must reach this kind of threshold. It must have, like you can do a lot of it in a standardized way, but the ultimate form of QA is, well, no one's putting any money in, so what does that say?
Right. So do you figure that the majority of the goals like that would unlock the pool money would be phrased in terms of like usage of the app and money going into the app?
No, no, because that does not allow you to approach your initial release piecemeal wise. It's basically saying you don't get any investment money until you've got revenue. And then you're like, if I have revenue, sorry, what do I need you for again?
Yeah, fair enough.
Right? You need the pooling and you need the investment to get you across the bridge of no revenue to revenue, and you want it ideally to be large enough that it can make the process go faster, because that's really what you're trying to get out of this, faster. I'm sharing the project to get more speed.
Okay, another question. I want to. No, hold on. Sorry, this is a lot to process because I can kind of visualize what you're talking about, but I don't think I'm quite there yet. If right, like, is there any sort of way of enforcing for sure that the people assessing, like the people, I guess I see four parties here. There's people producing the spec, there's people testing the spec, there's people providing the money, and there's people implementing the design, basically.
Yep. There's also someone else. There's a site admin that makes sure that all those parties can operate reasonably together. Mm-hmm. But that's like the person, that's the gatekeeper that would provide KYC and AML for money coming in and out. That would be the base platform operator, that type of thing. It's maybe incidental to what you were describing, but it should be noted that there is another party, which is the one whose house it is.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that one seems important to the question I was about to ask. So good to bring it up. It sounds like all four of those pieces kind of need to be like distinct and relatively like not the same people.
Yes.
Or no collusion between them.
Yes.
Because that would be a way you could definitely launder money, is if there's collusion between all of those parties, basically.
Yeah. But see, like we like me personally has the incentive to run a fair house, and so as quickly as possible, those duties are going to be segregated. Sure, there'll be some overlap at the start, but even just splitting the duties between two people, you know, like if you and I were working on a code base and being like, well, one of us is going to be QA, you know, and or both of us have to sign QA before it passes, something like that is still better than the guy that wrote it says it's okay.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, what more could you do than just best effort, to be honest, right? Like, there's no way to algorithmically enforce like a person not being an asshole.
It's kind of like, I mean, some of the protections against that come at the scale where those things are a problem. If we have that problem amongst our ranks now, we're fucked already. But once you get more people involved, that problem definitely arises. However, you've got more history to go on, you've got more reputation, you can allow competing QA teams, because let's not forget QA is worth a cut, and QA may charge a portion of the NFA payout, even the cash payout, to perform their duties. And so there's competition to be good at QA. Mm-hmm. It's just what I'm trying to lay out in this document here is here's an initial framework that I think can grow and not miss the goals of the Dreamcatcher whilst enabling initial participation. And the idea was it's supposed to be a reinforcing system. So the pieces we're trying to build are the pieces that the system runs on. And so getting a bit more information about what people want by where they put their money, even that's super valuable.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, I've spent half my life wondering why, like, the tax system doesn't already work like that. Like, why am I not allowed to pay taxes towards things that I think are valuable in society?
Yeah, I
Like,
couldn't agree with you more, actually. But, you know, let's start here because this sort of, I mean, in a company, that same gripe that you have is rife in every company.
mhm.
And this provides a way for the structure of the company to dynamically recompose itself very rapidly to adjust to new information. And I guess that's really the
Yeah,
essence of the system, right? How fast can this system adapt to change? Every time you complete an NFA, the whole game changed. Now it's a different world. What does that alter? All the things we learned, the world moved on, all this stuff, right?
yeah. It passes the sniff test for me for the most part. I think.
Because I
I'm
just looked at that video that got put in Discord that showed it was line goes up, and
yeah.
I could get a glimpse of the collectability of these images, right? And it's like trading cards and badges in games, like, I mean, call me a fucking nerd, but I used to play a lot of a game called Ingress. Um, have you heard of that game?
No.
It's a geocaching game where you have to actually physically be present somewhere to perform tasks on a monument or a different piece of public art and capture it, own it, and then draw links between that and other ones across town. Um, and so they had a series of badges. I really coveted some of those badges. Like, they were hard to earn. Like, you had to walk like 15,000 kilometers to be able to get these badges. But it's long story short, right? This turning software releases or issues or milestones into a badge like trading card collectible thing that I
Mhm.
can first of all covet when it's not there, so I can have it held out away from me and I'm like, oh, I want that. And then when I get it, it's now in my collectibles case and I can display it, show it, trade it. Like, I could turn up to a job interview with like a display or a flourish of all these cards that I've earned where I contributed to different things. And it's like, shit, this dude's actually fucking pretty baller,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
can't do that now because those contributions to those software releases are not objectified or assetified.
Mhm. Yeah. You get your like reward tiers or whatever,
Yeah,
but that you might get things from them, but they are not things in and of themselves.
right. And
Um,
then attaching a piece of AI art that also makes it unique, I think makes it easier for the humans in the system to grasp because
mhm.
you associate that unique picture with the thing and it makes it easier to even the Dreamcatcher objects we have right now are still pretty virtual or theoretical or abstract. Whereas putting this piece of art on it really brings the whole thing to life, in my opinion. It makes it that much more understandable or thingified. If it's got some cash
Yeah.
attached to it, a unique piece of art, and it's tradable, covetable, can earn something in the future, that's a thing, dude.
But so tradable, I'm not wrapping my head around completely. Um, Tradable here means like you never own more than a part of one of these things.
You could own the whole thing if it was only you.
Mhm.
You could own the whole thing if you traded or somehow arranged with others, which can be anything from money to I'll trade you these other parts of my NFAs for your parts of this one so I can have a whole, to turning up to someone's house with a bat and being like, transfer me this thing. So, obviously the DPL and the judicial system will have something to say about that. But the point is that fractionalized ownership is it's there by default. You can theoretically acquire 100%, but the fact that it's fractionalized by default means that even if you own 100%, you can sell 5% anytime you want.
How does that type of ownership relate to so I'm guessing this is only half the system. This is basically how money is provided into the system in order to move it forward. What about paying customers of apps? That's fundamentally a different view.
Yeah. So basically, you could think of these assets like the frozen state snapshots of a DAO.
Right.
And so it's like that single asset represents the history, the interactions, the voting, the debates, the screaming, yelling, crying, all of that ultimately got somewhere. And now it's all encapsulated in this thing, and it's distributed amongst the DAO members at that time. So that's one way to think about what these assets are. When it comes time to the customers paying, now I intentionally left that and a whole bunch of other things out of this web liquidity project because I'm like, I think this is the minimum to get up and going and build more things. But when revenue starts to flow in, it's going to be dispersed by these NFAs because these NFAs are in their purest untraded form. Because notice I've left out trading from this proposal. In their raw untraded form, they represent how to redisperse revenue coming in for a particular product.
Yeah. Now, from there, I think the hairy piece for me, the reason I'm asking about the actual ownership stake and so there's a considerable amount of the discussion that we've had in the past that goes into incremental change and how you can incrementally change things and then merge it back into the to the origin basically, and there's an incentive politically to do that. If I had something that was here that was already done, paid for, unlocked, the liquidity pool was released, people were paid, and I wanted to make an incremental change to it, is that a new project at that point? How do you decide?
Project. I think that it is it could be bundled into a new NFA, or it could be an expansion or an enhancement of the current NFA. So you could, at some later date, if what you were trying to make was an NPM library, you came and made some improvements, you made them for free, you could be said to gain a portion of that NFA, even though it's been minted, because you improved it or contributed to it.
Right, but does that come at the expense of dilution of the current pool?
Yeah, that dilutes the current pool. But keep in mind that even if you put money up, somebody could come along and do the whole thing for free and refuse your money and be like, that's entirely my NFA. I have completed it. I took no money. You guys get Not zero, because I think that asking for something in a high precision way is a contribution in and of itself.
Yeah. Actually, it's probably the most valuable one, in my opinion.
But the system attempts to reconcile two dimensions of contribution with each other. One is money and one is code construction.
Right.
As a side effect, to reconcile those two, we also need a third dimension, which is code quality control. And so now we're trying to reconcile all three of them together. But the two biggest battles are money and code. Now, there's other dimensions to be tackled later, like marketing, hype, project management, sales. All those types of things are extra dimensions that will need to be tokenized, fractionalized in some way. But for now, because we're trying to reconcile these two things, it is an inexact thing, and the pool provides a guide, not a finality on what that balance is. Keeping in mind that the final fractionalized ownership, or it's not even ownership, it's what the NFA mints out as, does not contain within it any indications of how to attribute. It simply contains record of contribution, not attribution. So if you paid 10 grand for something, it'll say that you paid 10 grand. It makes no assertions about what that is worth relative to the coder. It carries only record, not opinion.
Right. Right. So I had to say I lost the thread a bit here, because to me, I think a property of thingness like is that it doesn't like start partially disappearing from in front of you over time. Like
all things do that.
I guess, right? That's
decay.
Decay. Yeah.
But see, if you look at it from the point of view of this is a record of contribution, then someone who contributes to the upkeep of it is still contributing.
Right. Now, I guess the question.
That is a good question to ask, and before I get too much deeper, I just want to say that I don't actually know what the correct answer is to your question. The two options are obviously you can allow the original to be modified, or you can simply say that it's closed to modification and anything new is going to fall under some other bucket or some other thing.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation feels an awful lot like one we had in the past about like whether you identify the chain by the tip or the tail.
I think the truth is it's both, right? So you have to have the tail because that's so that you can reattach to the tip, but the tip is what the chain actually is. The tail is needed for discovery.
Yeah, the tip, like, you can't identify it by the tail because the tail's not.
Sorry, the tip. You can't identify it by the tip.
A tip being where you add the blocks on at the end, I guess, or
you can't identify it or discover it by that because you don't know what it is.
Exactly, it's fuzzy.
Yeah.
But so, like, I guess is the pool, is the NFA, is the asset, is the thing here, like the tail? Then basically, it's the that's determined at the outset before the contribution.
Yep. Okay. That's the NFA is the tail.
But it's the chain idea. It's the genesis block. It's the the original statement of intent of the thing.
Yep. And then it morphs. Okay. It can fork. It can be frozen. intuitively, it feels like the best option is to, once the NFA is completed, it freezes, and then extra contributions aren't really considered as like that token is that asset is assetified. That's it.
Yeah. I appreciate what you said about decay depreciation being like a real thing for things.
Yeah.
It's like it does kind of feel like this is actually kind of all a conversation about time and entropy. Like everything changes over time, and like the more things there are in the universe, like the more entropy there is, like depending on how you squint and look at it. Like if I have this thing in front of me,
these are systems where we're trying to balance a bunch of forces to have a net reduction in entropy. When we know that the natural state of things is to increase entropy, and we know that that happens all the time. And that's why we sort of reward things like having your money in the pool for a period of time, right? That was risky. Thank you.
Right. So it strikes me. I think I finally figured out a way to phrase what I'm thinking here. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Like, if the intent of the thing is the tail, is like the genesis, the initial description of what you want. Yeah. The dispersal event of the pool, like, has to be somewhere close to the tip. And like, is there only one dispersal event, or is there multiple dispersal events? Like, are the conditions like attached to the accounts where money is parked?
Yeah.
Is that
I think that in this initial version, there's only one. I wouldn't call it a dispersal event. There's only one payout or investment payout event.
Right.
But in the future, I would imagine you could nest these. Like, you could make children, like child tasks, subtasks, and you could pay out to each individual one as they became completed.
Right.
Dispersal to me is the event of someone finally paid some money for this piece of software, and now we're figuring out who it should be dispersed to, and moreover, we should do it instantaneously at time of payment. It's not ours to keep. It belongs to the people who contributed. If they want to auto re-up and put all their funds into the pool again, great, thank you. But it's not our business to tell them what to do with what they earned.
Right. So you get what I'm trying to drive at here, I think, is that like if you're gonna take the pool and like distribute it to the people who achieved the tasks, like at that point, like it really doesn't feel fair for the task to stay open.
The task closing and the payment being made are simultaneous. They're atomic.
Right. And so, like, at that point, to me, it feels like that asset, like, doesn't change, or like the ownership stake doesn't change, except for by trade, I guess. Right.
Yeah. That's cool. That sounds good to me, because you were more concerned with this object representing the task than you were concerned with the thing that the task produced.
Yeah. It just doesn't exactly, right? Because it's the task. Like what this thing is basically a Jira card.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a
collectible Jira card.
It's a highly collectible Jira card with its own little emblem that you can store in your fucking wallet, and it rolls up to a higher Jira card with its own emblem. And like, if you want to say you own a company, then in this system you would have the highest number of highest percentage ownership of the top level Jira card that makes it yours.
Right.
There's also a very interesting sleight of hand or difference between making Free Software Foundation free software and making closed source or restrictive license based software. I think that when it's truly free software, you literally have bought only the record of your contribution, and that's it. Should you earn some more from that, is you're sort of depending on ambient attribution taking off and being a thing and da 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 da. But the only thing you really bought, because the software is given away as free, is the record of your solemn, cold, unalterable record of contribution to this piece of free software. And that's all you can really rely on. But if
which is valuable in and of itself. I mean,
well, I think so, right? Because basically the world that I'm trying to paint is I'm like, soon, open source software will become recognized as needing to be paid for to keep it up to date, because we keep having national level security vulnerabilities pop out because the economics of open source hasn't been addressed. And so at that point, holding an immutable, inarguable record of contribution towards the code, not just in code but in money as well, should line you up to get paid something. I think also as ethics are starting to take off in supply chains, once people demand full end-to-end ethics in their supply chain, someone's got to pay the software devs. So again, this is a mechanism by which you really can't argue with, because it's the best fucking accounting system I know of for accounting for not just who put in code, because that's, you could reasonably figure that out, but who put in money, who put in project management effort, who put in cracking the whip, QA, all that. So, yeah. So I think it's valuable, but the point I wanted to make was that it's different to proposing to someone that you're going to make a piece of closed source software, because the closed source software, you do expect to be able to extract a return from that.
These things can also be born already in a closed state, like referencing whoever. This is what you're saying. You want to credit Linus for Linux.
Yeah, but these things don't do that. I can mint a virtual one where I'm like, look, I didn't make the Linux kernel, but I think that an appropriate NFA is this. And then when I do my dispersal events, which, as you say, is this whole other half of the system, I can then credit to these virtual NFAs, which are my effort at being ethical. It's my ethical model of the world, where people who are either not part of our system or who can no longer speak for themselves, or that I believe have been bullied or forced into saying something other than fair, I can disperse to my virtual version of their NFA instead of whatever other system of record is presented to me. And it's interesting that I can only really do that for free software, because proprietary software forces me to take a particular attribution path, even though I may disagree with it. But free software allows me to choose and to correct any wrongs that I may see, because I don't have to pay anything anyway. So it's one of the good parts of the system. But yeah, that's. I just figured that this web liquidity thing is something that we can get going with now, because as was rightly pointed out, people want to help out. They may not. I mean, they may not be able to contribute code, but they want to put some money in. And it's always been a problem of like, how, where, what for, what are you even buying? Like,
what's their upside though? Like this contribution data, is that what's actually used to calculate dispersal?
yes,
Okay.
100%. This is what's used.
Right. So like an idea, and then I put code to it, you put money to it.
Yep.
You put code to it, I put money to it, somebody else puts QA to it. And then at some point it closes.
Yep.
And now that feels like, where is the code? I was actually originally thinking the code itself lived a lot closer to this thing.
Yeah, it will later, but right now, all I'm planning to set up is a GitHub webhook so that every time you commit, the pool receives the latest commit hash and who by. And so if you've got the commit hash, and so long as someone keeps a copy of the repo somewhere, we can always fill in the blanks and calculate this stuff.
Right.
I figure that the recording of contribution is the first thing to get, and then we figure out how to do attribution.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty reasonable. I'm not sure you'll get a ton of traction without having both.
Absolutely. But anyone who... I see this thing as being incremental, right? Like we can open the basically the begging caps as soon as this project goes up, and then that can help us build the next level, and then, you know, like it sort of hopefully starts to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But got to start somewhere. And I think this is the minimum thing that serves us.
Yeah, it's actually starting to feel like a spec. I'm genuinely happy. No, man, I know how hard it is to write a spec. Like it's brutal. I don't know why it, like, the more detail you put into it, the less likely it is to get acted on.
I know. So I don't know if you had a chance to see what Scott did in the Dreamcatcher and funding NFAs, but he came up with a way of specifying that was much more pure problem. So it was basically a series of top level strategic intent. So the overall, this is what we're trying to achieve. And then tactical intent meant like very specific sub intents. And each one was specified using must, could, should, and must not, to try and be as pure as you can, to allow as much freedom of solution as you possibly can manage, because my observation with specs is they always turn out to be dictatorial as opposed to request for solution type of things.
Yeah, it's easy to let your mind kind of drift over into I know how this should be built, right?
Yeah,
but
solution mode.
It's in nobody's interest to do that, because like by the time you've explained it fully, you've basically written the software.
Yeah, right. And so you've basically, I think that's called the XY problem in the internet, where, you know, you end up asking for help on a forum for problem X, but really like you had problem Y, and it's just you started to try to solve it, and then you hit problem X and you're like, help, but that's not what you want.
You want Y, right?
Yeah, you wanted Y. And so by demanding that part of the QA process is to write specs in this pure problem type of way that allows for freedom of solution, you know, I hope we'll get a better result, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it does feel like a spec, right? Like if you look at the workflow section, I've sort of listed the 14 activities that I think we need out of the system to launch with. It's not that many. And then I also made a start on the Ethereum Bridge NFA. The AI drew a really nice picture for that one. Like, I thought it was a cool picture.
It's a. Are you using the words to seed this? Like,
Yeah, the words for the task seed the image.
that's cool.
It's
And
fucking
this
awesome.
is the GAN, the one that I see on Twitter all the time, right?
What?
Trying to find it.
It's called hotpot.ai.
Hotpot.ai.
It's a beautiful
I
thing.
think I found some instructions somewhere once about how to build those, like how to build the like AI cluster you need to generate those kind of images.
I just care that we got a piece of unique art that was generated from a task specification, which is fucking great.
Yeah, that's a cool image for sure. Do you see it with the word Dreamcatcher as well? I imagine
Well,
every time.
yeah. So like, well, I seed it with the top level pool. So it's like as the pools get nested down, you at least get like top level themed things.
Mhm.
So I mean, that image was just Dreamcatcher Ethereum Bridge, and then it kind of somehow did it. Like I look at it and I see all those things in there.
I like that the strategic intent image looks like it's trying to build an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, because that one I seeded with Dreamcatcher algorithmic cap table.
Ah, there you go.
so I'm like,
Now,
yeah.
now that I know that's how these were built, I'm actually really into them. I think
Well,
they're
the fact that like you can turn this task into a collector's card, like
mhm.
many years from now, hopefully after these tasks are done, you know, we should be able to look back at our wallets and see these like pretty cool images that just sort of represent a lot about what we thought looked cool in terms of color, style, what was possible with AI at that time, all
Mhm.
that, right? And so it's more about the trading card than it is about the text of the specification because fucking yawn. Who wants to fucking collect specs? Nobody. Absolutely fucking nobody. And then if next to your wallet you have a list of your NFAs that you own some of, and it shows your percentage yield, like how much dispersal is coming back for each one, and you can start to see like these things are earning. These are earning you money. They become even more enticing and beautiful if it's like pretty picture earns me money, no one else has it. Sweet. I mean, I want these things now. I can't even properly explain it, but like as soon as I started associating these unique images with the task, I felt more covetous of them. Like I wanted the task to be done more so that I could have this complete little badge in my wallet that had this cool thing that I knew was it, like
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to trick people's brains.
yeah, it
It's
tricked
a
my brain. Even though, I put all the things in place there, it made me desire these tasks more.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
I've been talking through a badge system on the app that I'm building right now too, because it's
right,
just like
right.
it's like a superset of like user verification. You could put like dunce caps on people that are misbehaving, that kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
you could do a lot of things with badges.
yeah. And so we're trying to objectify contribution and wrapping them up nicely with a picture like this is
Mhm.
absolutely worth the effort, I think, because the gains, and making it accessible to people who don't like. Have you lately spoken to someone who really didn't code but knew that they valued software? Like
No.
right, because probably all the people you talk to know about software. So
Yeah.
yeah, these other people, like, they have such little idea on how this stuff works that if you gave them these pictures, they can really start to relate to them because it's a thing now.
Plus, it's creepy AI.
Yeah, I mean, it just I still don't feel like I've said exactly what it is about it that makes it so enticing to put these images there, but I fucking love it. Like, I love it so much.
It's a rallying point. I mean, it's pretty easy, right? It's so like if alignment is the hardest problem in making software.
Right. And getting people to align on a spec is kind of a pain, but if you put an image there to rally around, it honestly feels easier. It feels easier to rally around a completely abstract pictorial thing.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you put the trading card like metaphor on top of it later, because like the fact that you could talk to each other about who owns what part of what and like whether you want more of a stake in it or not, it's I think, but like just having the picture there, I mean, this is the same thing. Urbit kind of did this, like when they figured out that their addresses were like still too hard for people to grok or like care about, they started making like algorithmically generated images to represent every address in the space.
Right.
And like as soon as I saw that, like they're selling addresses on OpenSea, I'm like really honestly contemplated buying my first NFT. Even though I personally think the whole NFT thing is like a complete joke right now.
Right, but there's some essence in there that makes you want it.
It's like you can like your sense of vision is like the one that gives you the most information about the world, right?
Yeah, and like reading a hex number does not make me feel anything. I read it and I'm like,
even if you like did some humanizing of it to make it like pronounceable, map it onto vowels more frequently or whatever, like it still didn't work, but like turn it into an image and now it's like it's really easy to talk about.
Yeah.
It like hides even the fact that there might be contention about what you're trying to build underneath of it, right?
Yeah. It's weird, man. It's so weird.
Yeah. Anyway, I need to start thinking about jumping off.
Sweet.
If you have anything else, there was something else that you had said as the topic.
Block producer synchronizing, but yeah. I think I figured that one out.
Yeah. Specifically, like whether the communication should be like one chain for two or like a one chain for each.
Yeah, and then we spoke about it. We spoke about it in chat, and then I thought about it a bit more and was like, yeah, it should be one chain for each, because that is what a socket looks like to you. You both have a different thing that represents your end of the socket. The socket is the connection between the two ends, which is the connection between the two chains. And I think that's the closest model to reality that there can be.
Yeah, I was actually thinking the other direction.
Oh yeah, tell me why.
Because to me, it feels like it's easier to write the side effect layer if it's like, so two things. One, like it's way easier for me to fulfill synchronizing that communication chain that has both of our ends in it with a number of different protocols beneath it. Like you can synchronize that. It's just a matter of getting to the most current block, basically, right? For both people, it's the same problem.
But why would it make it easier if there were one chain shared by two? versus two chains connected together.
Well, because now they both have to keep their side effect layers talking.
But that's what's happening anyway. Like, whatever transport you chose, each side is responsible for keeping their particular instance of that side effect operational.
Yeah, right. I guess there would be like a disagreement over time, like about what the most current block is if both people's data is in the same
Right,
chain.
and then the problem there is if you want to sort out that disagreement, which will happen and you want to do, you now have to go off chain to sort it out. And so now you've made a protocol on the transport layer when the only protocol on the transport layer should be interblocks.
It should be the transport, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that's a pretty sound reasoning to me. The other thing I was thinking is just that, like, if you have two people in the chain, then it generalizes to n people easier. But I actually don't think it does because, again, you're going to have to build a protocol to keep n people in sync now. That's going to be a side effect layer.
Yeah, so it's actually better, I think, to model your end of the socket as a chain, and you control the side effect layer that operates with the hardware that sort of sends stuff out, and then stuff magically pops in, and you process it in your chain, in your rules, with your trust. And then put it into the rest of the system if that's what you want to do with it. I also figured that the payload layer is crucial to avoiding telescoping, because once you have, for example, a block stored in your system, you need to be able to refer to it by hash only to avoid it being restored in a system block as well. So payload layer plus side effects means that you can move data around by reference. And I do believe it is useful to be able to replay and audit what the socket chain did, for example. Sure, you may want to discard it every so often, but it's pretty useful to be able to replay and see what it did without having it clogged up with the data it was sending being inside its blocks.
Yeah. Everything should get to the payload layer as fast as possible.
Pretty much, right? And then when you want to send blocks are payload layer, even though when they're loaded up and running, they control a payload layer. But then when they get stored, they become payload layer. And I think that's the oscillation between, like, you treat them like payload layer when you aren't running them, but when you load up to execute the next block, you pull them out of payload layer, and now they are a block that can interact with the payload layer of other blocks, including their own last block.
Right.
Yeah. So, anyway,
that all makes sense.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that one. Seems good.
Do you have much of the payload layer written yet?
No.
Is it still just a key value store on the node instance?
Yeah, it's just so I've been using RxDB in the browser and on the node side, just because I didn't want to have to keep two different databases and types of database and thing. And in the browser, it uses Loki.js under the hood, which is an in-memory database backed by IndexedDB to avoid the horrific performance of IndexedDB. Horrific.
It's brutal, eh?
It's like, how could you do that to us and then call it a DB? Like, you should drop the DB part on the end. Like, it's
it's all just strings, right?
Well, it's not. Even that would be okay. The fact that sometimes it takes 5 seconds to respond and other times 30 milliseconds. That's a problem.
You see, there's a like a full blown SQL in the browser now too.
What? You mean like web SQL? I thought that was deprecated. Yeah. That was deprecated.
Is it? Yeah. Oh, is it?
Yeah. IndexedDB is all there is right now. There must be some weird sort of bunch of exploits or performance problems or something that happens. That's why these things have to keep being so shitty. Is because security or something. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, you want to know my honest opinion?
What's that?
Like, the big companies are trying to kill the web.
Why not? I mean, it's big money to be made if you control the web.
Right. But I mean, like, Chrome is basically a play to make it so hard to build a browser that, like,
You
there's
have to
no.
use the Chrome engine. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And have you seen the size of that code base?
Yeah, I haven't in a long time, but I can't imagine it's
And
small.
it's largely C++.
Yeah.
But I mean, Firefox, it's actually quite wise what Firefox did. They built their own engine out of Rust, and that's
Hmm.
actually should commend them for that more. But
Yeah.
yeah,
They made Rust too, right?
they made Rust to make that engine, I think.
Hmm. Which is like Rust is like a pretty phenomenal language, actually.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I'm good for code. I just you keep on asking for what's the minimum thing, and
That's good. I'm glad.
so I guess if you could have a think about that liquidity proposal, if you can strip it
Yeah.
down more, great. If you got questions about weaknesses or problems, hit me up. That'd be good. I think that's the minimum thing to make, and it sort of contains within it funding.
Yeah. I mean that would have to be the first thing for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like, I mean, we've got investors lined up. It's just the problem was how to get their money into the system without them ending up our enemy later. And in this document, I detail how we can do that using a company that simply manages their funds, gives them their guarantees of securities, but then just simply puts the money in the pool to be used.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I really fundamentally like the idea of like an address that you can park money at that like is algorithmically released. Like the
Yeah.
idea of being able to put conditions on the flow of money.
Yeah.
I think it's like not something that is that common right now.
No, and it's more like coordinated conditions between a large number of people all agreeing to a condition, which enables them to act like a pack without the sort of the overheads that kill a lot of small member packs.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to read through it. I'll definitely ping questions to the code topics channel. Or is there a better channel for it?
Whatever. Oh, I'm sure there's only 4 of us. I'm sure I'll get the message.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's good to talk.
Likewise, man. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, you too.
I will see you later.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye.